Karoline Leavitt was not your average 25-year-old. With her bright smile, warm personality, and unwavering faith, she had become a sensation on social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok. Her posts were simple yet powerful, short videos, of her talking about how faith could help people navigate life's toughest challenges. Whether it was dealing with heartbreak, career setbacks, or just the everyday struggles of being human, Karoline always found a way to tie everything back to her belief in God. She wasn't preachy or judgmental. Instead, she came across as genuine and relatable, which is why millions followed her online. Her followers loved her for many reasons. Some admired her ability to find hope even in difficult situations. Others appreciated her honesty about her own struggles. But what really set Karoline apart was her authenticity. She didn't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, she openly shared her journey of learning to trust in something bigger than herself. This approach resonated deeply with people from all walks of life, regardless of whether they shared her religious beliefs. It wasn't uncommon for atheists or agnostics to comment on her posts saying, "I don't believe what you believe, but I respect your perspective." One morning, as Karoline scrolled through her phone over breakfast, she saw an email notification that made her heart skip a beat. It was from The View. The producers wanted her to appear as a guest on the show. At first, she thought it might be a prank. After all, The View was one of the most popular talk shows in America, known for its lively debates and diverse panel of hosts who often held strong opinions. Why would they want someone like her, a small-town girl turned internet preacher, to join their lineup? But as she read the email again, her excitement grew. They specifically mentioned her viral video where she talked about finding peace through prayer after losing her job during the pandemic. Apparently, the clip had caught the attention of one of the producers, who thought her story would make for an interesting discussion. Karoline felt a mix of emotions: pride, nervousness, and maybe even a little fear. She knew appearing on national television would bring new opportunities, but it also meant stepping out of her comfort zone. What if the hosts didn't understand her message? Worse, what if they mocked her faith? Still, Karoline couldn't pass up this chance. For years, she'd dreamed of using her platform to inspire others beyond social media. If she played her cards right, this could be the moment that changed everything. So after taking a deep breath and consulting with her family, she replied to the email, accepting the invitation. Over the next few days, she prepared tirelessly, rehearsing potential talking points and watching old episodes of The View to get a sense of each host's personality. Among the co-hosts, one name stood out: Whoopi Goldberg. Known for her sharp wit and no-nonsense attitude, Whoopi was famous for challenging guests whose views clashed with her own. She rarely shied away from controversial topics, and when it came to religion, she often expressed skepticism. In interviews, she joked about organized religion and questioned the existence of God. To say Karoline was intimidated by the prospect of facing Whoopi would be an understatement. Yet she reminded herself why she was doing this: to share her truth and hopefully touch someone's heart. On the day of the taping, Karoline arrived at the studio early, clutching her Bible close to her chest. As she walked into the building, she felt tiny compared to the bustling energy around her. Cameras, lights, and crew members filled every corner. Someone handed her a microphone pack, and another person led her to the makeup chair. While the Whoopi stylist worked on her hair, Karoline tried to calm her nerves by praying silently. "God," she whispered, "please give me the words to say and the courage to stay true to myself." Before long, it was time to take her seat at the round table. As she settled in, she glanced around at the other hosts. Joy Behar smiled warmly, while Sunny Hostin nodded encouragingly. Meghan McCain gave her a thumbs up, and then there was Whoopi. Sitting casually in her chair, Whoopi looked as cool and collected as ever. Her signature glasses rested on her nose, and her expression was unreadable. Karoline swallowed hard, reminding herself to focus on the message rather than the messenger. As the cameras rolled and the introductions began, Karoline forced herself to relax. She listened intently as the hosts welcomed her to the show and briefly summarized her background. When it was her turn to speak, she leaned forward slightly, making eye contact with each host. "Thank you so much for having me," she said, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "I'm really excited to share my story today because I truly believe that faith can change lives, including mine." The audience clapped politely, but Karoline noticed Whoopi tapping her pen against the table, her lips curling into a faint smirk. Whatever happened next, Karoline knew she had to stay grounded. Little did she know this conversation would test her resolve and leave everyone, including Whoopi, speechless. The conversation began innocently enough. One of the hosts, Joy Behar, kicked things off by asking Karoline to share more about her journey and how she started using social media to spread messages of faith. Karoline smiled warmly, leaning slightly forward, as if speaking directly to each viewer at home. "Well," she began, "it all started when I went through a really tough time in my life. I lost my job and honestly I felt completely lost. But during that season I turned to prayer and scripture, and it gave me hope. When I started sharing those lessons online, people responded in ways I never expected." Her answer seemed to resonate with the audience, who nodded along approvingly. Even Whoopi, who had been idly doodling on her notepad, paused for a moment to glance up. Encouraged by the positive reaction, Karoline continued, "Faith isn't just about religion. It's about trusting that even when life feels chaotic, there's purpose behind it all." At this point, Whoopi raised an eyebrow. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms casually. "Okay, but do you really think God personally steps in to fix things?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism. Before Karoline could respond, Whoopi added with a smirk, "Like if someone prays hard enough, will their car magically repair itself or their rent check appear out of thin air?" The room erupted into laughter. Some members of the audience chuckled nervously, while others seemed delighted by Whoopi's blunt humor. Karoline, however, didn't flinch. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm and composed. "That's a great question," she replied, her voice steady. "I don't believe God works like magic. He doesn't snap his fingers and make everything perfect overnight. But I do believe that faith gives us strength to face challenges and find solutions we might not see otherwise." Whoopi tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. "So what you're saying is, God helps those who help themselves?" she quipped, drawing another round of laughter from the crowd. This time, Karoline joined in, letting out a soft laugh. "In a way, yes," she admitted. "But it's also about surrendering control. Sometimes we try so hard to figure everything out on our own. But faith teaches us to trust that things will work out, even if they don't look exactly how we imagined." Her response earned a few murmurs of agreement from the audience, but Whoopi wasn't done yet. She leaned forward now, resting her elbows on the table. "Let me ask you something else," she said, her tone playful but probing. "What happens to people who don't believe in your God? Are they just doomed?" The question hung in the air, sharp and direct. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tension rising. Karoline hesitated for a split second before responding. "Absolutely not," she said firmly, meeting Whoopi's gaze. "My faith teaches me that love and compassion are universal. Whether someone believes in God or not, they can still experience kindness, joy, and purpose. Faith is just one path, not the only path." This answer seemed to catch Whoopi off guard, but only for a moment. She quickly recovered, firing back with another jab. "So if faith is just one path, why spend so much time convincing people to walk it?" she asked, raising her hands dramatically. "Why not let everyone find their own way without pushing yours onto them?" The audience laughed again, and Karoline felt the pressure mounting. She knew Whoopi was testing her, trying to provoke a reaction, but instead of getting defensive, she chose to dig deeper. "You know, I think faith is less about convincing and more about sharing," she explained. "When something transforms your life, you naturally want to tell others about it. It's like finding a great recipe. You don't keep it to yourself because you want others to enjoy it too." Whoopi smirked, clearly entertained by the analogy. "A recipe for eternal happiness, huh?" she teased, earning yet another wave of laughter. "Well, I guess I'll stick to my chocolate cake recipe for now." Despite the jokes, Karoline noticed a subtle shift in Whoopi's demeanor. Beneath the sarcasm, there was curiosity, a glimmer of genuine interest. Still, Whoopi wasn't ready to let up. She pressed further, asking, "But what about science? Don't you ever feel like faith and logic contradict each other?" Karoline thought carefully before answering. "Not at all," she said. "Science explains how things happen, but faith answers the why. For example, science tells us how the universe was formed, but faith reminds us to marvel at its beauty and complexity. They're two sides of the same coin." This time the audience responded with applause, signaling their appreciation for Karoline's thoughtful reply. Whoopi, however, remained unfazed. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the table again. "All right, fair enough," she conceded half-heartedly. "But let's talk about miracles. Do you really believe in stuff like walking on water or parting seas?" The question drew a mix of reactions. Some laughed, while others looked intrigued. Karoline smiled gently, recognizing the challenge. "Miracles aren't always these grand, supernatural events," she explained. "Sometimes a miracle is simply waking up each day with a second chance, or finding peace after a storm. Those moments may not seem miraculous to everyone, but to me they're proof that there's something greater guiding us." Her words resonated deeply with several audience members who exchanged knowing looks. Even Sunny Hostin chimed in, saying, "I think a lot of people would agree with that perspective, whether they're religious or not." Whoopi nodded slowly, seemingly processing the sentiment. For a brief moment, the atmosphere softened, but Whoopi wasn't finished yet. With a mischievous grin, she delivered her final zinger. "All right, last question. If I prayed hard enough, would my cable bill disappear too?" The room burst into laughter once more, and Karoline couldn't help but chuckle along. "Well," she joked, "you'd probably have better luck calling customer service." The playful banter lightened the mood, giving Karoline a chance to regroup. Though she had held her ground admirably, she couldn't shake the feeling that Whoopi was still skeptical and perhaps even dismissive of her beliefs. Little did either of them know, the conversation was about to take a turn that neither could have anticipated. As the laughter from Whoopi's cable bill joke faded, the energy in the room shifted slightly. Karoline could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. She had managed to stay composed through Whoopi's rapid-fire questions and witty remarks, but she couldn't ignore the growing tension. It wasn't just about defending her faith anymore. It was about connecting with someone who seemed determined to challenge every word she said. And while Whoopi's humor kept the audience entertained, Karoline sensed there was something deeper beneath the surface. Whoopi leaned forward again, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "All right, let's get real for a second," she said, her tone softer but still probing. "You talk a lot about trust and surrendering control, but what happens when life doesn't work out the way you prayed for? What if you lose something or someone you can't get back?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. Karoline froze for a moment, her mind flashing back to memories she rarely spoke about. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy and expectant. Everyone waited to see how she would respond. Would she dodge the question? Would she try to spin it into another uplifting message? Or would she finally reveal the cracks in her seemingly perfect faith? Karoline took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. For the first time since the interview began, her confident smile wavered. "I've been there," she admitted quietly, her voice trembling slightly. 3 years ago, I lost my dad to cancer." The words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. The audience, which had been quick to laugh moments earlier, now sat in stunned silence. Even Whoopi's usually sharp demeanor softened as she processed what Karoline had just shared. No one expected this turn in the conversation. "He was my best friend," Karoline continued, tears welling up in her eyes. "And I prayed so hard for him to get better. Every night I begged God to heal him, to give us more time together. But," her voice cracked, and she paused to compose herself, "he didn't make it." For a moment, no one spoke. The camera zoomed in on Karoline's face, capturing the pain etched into her features. She wiped away a tear, then looked directly at Whoopi. "That was the hardest thing I've ever gone through. There were days when I felt angry, at God at myself, at the world. I questioned everything. How could a loving God let this happen? Why didn't my prayers work? Whoopi stared at her, her pen frozen mid-tap against the table. The playful smirk that had dominated her face throughout the interview was gone, replaced by an expression of quiet reflection. She didn't interrupt or throw out another sarcastic remark. Instead, she listened intently, as if sensing that something profound was unfolding. But here's the thing, Karoline went on, her voice steadying. Even in the darkest moments, my faith gave me something to hold on to. It didn't bring my dad back, and it didn't magically fix everything, but it reminded me that love doesn't end. That connection we shared, that bond, is still alive in me, and that's what keeps me going. Her words resonated deeply, not just with the audience, but with the hosts as well. Joy Behar nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with emotion. Megan, McCain reached for a tissue, dabbing at her own tears. Even Sunny Hostin, known for her measured responses, looked visibly moved. The atmosphere in the room had transformed entirely, from light-hearted banter to a shared moment of vulnerability. Whoopi broke the silence first, though her tone was markedly different now. "That's heavy," she said simply, leaning back in her chair. Her usual bravado was replaced by a rare sincerity. "I mean, I've lost people too. My brother, my friends. You start wondering, what's the point?" Karoline nodded, grateful for the opening. "Exactly," she replied. "Grief changes you, it makes you ask those big questions. But for me, faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about finding strength when you feel like giving up. It's about believing that even in loss, there's meaning." Whoopi tilted her head, studying Karoline carefully. "So, you're saying faith helps you keep moving forward?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. "Even when it feels like nothing makes sense?" "Yes," Karoline answered without hesitation. "It's not always easy. Some days I still struggle. But knowing that my dad's love lives on in me, that his legacy is part of who I am, it gives me hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there's a bigger plan we can't see yet." The audience erupted into applause, but it was different this time. There was no trace of mockery or amusement. Instead, the clapping felt supportive, almost reverent. People weren't cheering because of clever quips or entertaining arguments. They were applauding Karoline's courage to be honest, to share a piece of her soul with millions of strangers. Whoopi sat silently for a few seconds, her gaze locked on Karoline. Then, in a rare display of vulnerability, she said, "You know, I've never thought about faith like that before." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. "I guess I always saw it as rules and rituals, but what you're describing sounds different, like it's less about religion and more about survival." Karoline smiled faintly, touched by Whoopi's admission. "That's exactly right," she said. "Faith isn't about perfection. It's about holding on when you feel like letting go." The two women exchanged a long look, their earlier dynamic completely transformed. Gone was the combative tone, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. Whoopi didn't apologize for her earlier jokes. She wasn't that kind of person, but her body language spoke volumes. She had stopped challenging Karoline and started listening. As the segment neared its conclusion, the other hosts chimed in, praising Karoline for her openness and resilience. Joy Behar remarked, "You've got guts, kid. Not everyone could handle tough questions like that with such grace." Megan added, "And you remind us that faith isn't one size fits all. It means something different to everyone." By the time the commercial break rolled around, the tension in the room had dissolved entirely. The audience buzzed with quiet conversations, many nodding in agreement or wiping away tears. Karoline exhaled deeply, realizing she had made it through one of the most challenging moments of her life. She glanced over at Whoopi, who gave her a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement of the bridge they had built between them. Little did anyone know, this exchange would spark discussions far beyond the confines of the studio. Social media lit up, with reactions as viewers debated, reflected, and shared their own stories of loss and faith. And for Whoopi, The encounter planted a seed of curiosity, one that would lead to unexpected reflections in the days to come. As the conversation on The View wrapped up, the atmosphere in the studio had shifted dramatically. What began as a playful, if not slightly combative exchange between Karoline and Whoopi had evolved into something far more profound. The audience, which had initially laughed at Whoopi's witty remarks, now sat quietly, absorbing the emotional weight of Karoline's story. Even the hosts, known for their quick wit and sharp commentary, seemed unusually reflective. When the cameras cut to commercial, the energy backstage was palpable. Karoline stepped away from the table, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her microphone pack. She hadn't expected to share such a personal part of her life on national television, but she felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if speaking openly about her father's death had allowed her to release some of the lingering pain she'd carried for years. Still, she couldn't help but wonder how Whoopi and the rest of the world would react once the episode aired. Meanwhile, Whoopi remained seated at the table, staring thoughtfully at the empty chair Karoline had just vacated. Her mind raced, with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she admired Karoline's courage and vulnerability. Few people could handle tough questions under such intense scrutiny without losing their composure. On the other hand, Whoopi struggled to reconcile what she'd heard with her own beliefs or lack thereof. Faith had never been a significant part of her life. In fact, she often viewed organized religion with skepticism, seeing it as a source of division rather than unity. But Karoline's perspective was different. It wasn't rigid or dogmatic. Instead, it felt deeply human. During the break, the production crew buzzed around, resetting lights and checking sound levels. Joy Behar approached Whoopi, leaning down to whisper, "You okay? That was heavy." Whoopi nodded slowly, still lost in thought. "Yeah," she muttered. "I just didn't expect her to go there, you know. I mean, I was messing with her before, but that last part..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "It hit me." Joy smiled knowingly. "That's the thing about faith," she said. "It's not always about answers. Sometimes it's about finding a way to keep going when everything falls apart." Whoopi glanced at her, surprised by the insight. "Huh," she replied. "Never thought of it like that." Backstage, Karoline was greeted by hugs from the show's staff and producers. Many thanked her for sharing her story so honestly, telling her how much it resonated with them. One producer even admitted, "I lost my mom last year, and hearing you talk about your dad, it reminded me of my own grief. Thank you for saying what so many of us feel but can't put into words." Karoline smiled through her tears, grateful for the outpouring of support. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that her work wasn't done. As the break ended and she returned to the table for the final segment, she resolved to leave the audience with one last message, a line that might stick with them long after. The show was over. When the cameras rolled again, the tone of the conversation had softened considerably. The hosts took turns thanking Karoline for her honesty and resilience, praising her ability to find strength in difficult times. Sonny Hostin remarked, "You remind us that faith doesn't have to be complicated. It's about connection, whether it's with God, with others, or even with ourselves." Megan McCain added, "And it's clear that your faith isn't just something you talk about online. It's real. It's lived." Whoopi, who had been unusually quiet during these exchanges, finally spoke up. "Look," she began, her voice steady, but tinged with emotion. "I've got to admit, I came into this thinking, what is this girl going to say that I haven't heard a million times before?" The audience chuckled softly, recalling her earlier quips. "But then you dropped that bomb about your dad and, well, let's just say it made me think." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know if I believe in God or prayer or any of that stuff, but what you said about holding on when you feel like letting go, that stuck with me. Because we've all been there, right? Life knocks you down, and sometimes getting back up feels impossible. If faith helps people do that, then maybe it's worth respecting even if it's not for everyone." Her admission drew applause from the audience, but it was the sincerity in her voice that truly resonated. For someone like Whoopi, who rarely opened up about personal struggles, this moment felt monumental. Karoline looked at her, visibly moved. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "Faith isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about finding light in the darkness, even if it's just a tiny flicker." The two women exchanged a meaningful glance, their earlier tension replaced by mutual understanding. It was clear that something significant had transpired, not just between them, but within the hearts of everyone watching. As the segment neared its conclusion, Karoline seized the opportunity to deliver her final message. "If there's one thing I hope people take away from today," she said, addressing both the hosts and the audience, "it's this. Faith isn't about having everything figured out. It's about trusting that even when life doesn't make sense, there's still purpose behind it all, and sometimes that trust is enough to carry you through." Her words hung in the air, simple yet powerful. The audience erupted into applause, this time louder and more heartfelt than ever before. Some wiped away tears while others nodded in agreement. Even the usually stoic Whoopi clapped along, her expression softening further. When the show ended, and the credits rolled, Karoline was swarmed by well-wishers. Fans lined up to thank her for sharing her story, while others asked for advice on navigating their own struggles. Meanwhile, Whoopi lingered near the exit, waiting for a private moment to speak with Karoline. When the crowd finally dispersed, she approached the young influencer, extending her hand. "Listen," Whoopi said, her voice low but earnest. "I want to thank you for being brave enough to share your truth and for making me think about things I haven't thought about in a long time." Karoline shook her hand, smiling warmly. "Thank you for listening," she replied. "That means more than you know." The two women parted ways, each carrying a newfound appreciation for the other's perspective. For Karoline, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of vulnerability. For Whoopi, it planted a seed of curiosity, a willingness to explore ideas she had once dismissed outright. And for the millions of viewers tuning in, the encounter served as a reminder that even in disagreement, understanding is possible. Little did they know, this moment would spark conversations far beyond the confines of the studio. Social media lit up with reactions as people debated, reflected, and shared their own stories of loss, faith, and resilience. Some praised Karoline for her grace under pressure, while others commended Whoopi for her openness to new perspectives. Ultimately, the exchange became a testament to the transformative power of dialogue, and proof that sometimes laughter can lead to moments of profound clarity. The moment the episode of The View aired, it ignited a firestorm of reactions across social media platforms and beyond. Clips from the interview spread like wildfire, with millions of viewers sharing snippets of Karoline's heartfelt story and Whoopi's unexpected admission. What started as a seemingly light-hearted segment quickly became one of the most talked-about moments in recent television history. People couldn't stop discussing the raw honesty, the emotional depth, and the surprising bridge that had formed between two women who seemed to come from completely different worlds. On Twitter, hashtags like Faith in Action, Whoopi and Karoline, and Holding On trended for hours. Some posts praised Karoline for her courage and grace under pressure. "She didn't back down or get defensive," one user wrote. "Instead, she turned a tough conversation into something meaningful. That's real strength." Others highlighted Whoopi's willingness to listen and reflect, noting how rare it was to see someone known for their sharp wit soften so openly. Whoopi proved today that even skeptics can grow when they're open to hearing another perspective, another tweet read. But not everyone agreed. Predictably, the comments section exploded with debates about faith, religion, and whether belief in God was still relevant in modern society. Atheists argued that science offered more tangible solutions than prayer, while believers countered that faith provided comfort and purpose that logic alone couldn't fulfill. Amidst the polarized opinions, however, there was a noticeable shift. Many viewers found themselves reflecting on their own lives, regardless of where they stood on the spectrum of belief. One particularly viral post came from a young woman named Sarah, who shared her own experience of losing her mother to illness. "I watched the show thinking I'd laugh at Whoopi roasting some influencer," she wrote. Instead, I ended up crying because Karoline's words hit me right in the chest. She said exactly what I've been feeling but haven't been able to articulate. Faith isn't about fixing everything. It's about holding on when you feel like letting go. Sarah's post resonated deeply, garnering thousands of likes and replies. Many people chimed in with their own stories of grief, struggle, and resilience. One man recounted how his faith helped him survive addiction, while another woman described finding solace in prayer after a painful divorce. The thread turned into a virtual support group, with strangers offering each other encouragement and understanding. It was a testament to the ripple effect of Karoline's message, how one person's vulnerability could inspire countless others to open up about their own battles. Backstage after the taping, Karoline felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. As she scrolled through her phone reading messages from fans and followers, she realized just how impactful her appearance on The View had been. But she also knew this wasn't the end of her journey. It was merely the beginning. Inspired by the response, she decided to create a new series on her social media channels called Holding On, where she would share interviews with people who had faced unimaginable hardships, yet found ways to persevere. Her goal was simple: to remind others that they weren't alone. Meanwhile, Whoopi found herself grappling with her own emotions in the days following the show. Though she rarely discussed personal matters publicly, she couldn't shake the impact of Karoline's story or her own reaction to it. During an appearance on Late Night with Seth Meyers, she opened up about the experience, admitting that the conversation had stayed with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. I went into that interview thinking, this is going to be fun, Whoopi told Seth, her signature humor softening the gravity of her words. You know, poke a little fun at someone whose worldview is totally different from mine. But then she started talking about her dad, and suddenly it wasn't funny anymore. It was real. Seth leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean? He asked. Whoopi sighed, choosing her words carefully. I've lost people too, you know. My brother, my friends. You start wondering why bad things happen, and if there's any point to any of it. Hearing Karoline talk about holding on, even when life doesn't make sense, it made me think maybe there's something to that whole faith thing after all. Her candor surprised both Seth and the audience. Whoopi wasn't one to mince words, but she also wasn't prone to introspection at least not in public. Yet here she was, acknowledging that Karoline's perspective had challenged her own beliefs in a way she hadn't anticipated. When Seth pressed her further, asking if she now believed in God, Whoopi chuckled. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, she joked. But I will say this, if faith helps people keep moving forward when they feel like giving up, then maybe it's worth respecting, even if it's not for me. Her comments sparked even more discussion online, with fans praising her for being honest and vulnerable. Some noted that Whoopi's openness was refreshing, especially coming from someone who often played the role of skeptic. Whoopi showed us that it's okay to question and doubt, one fan tweeted, but it's also okay to listen and learn, even from those we don't agree with. As the weeks went by, the ripple effects of the interview continued to unfold. Karoline's follower count skyrocketed, and her Holding On series gained traction almost immediately. Each episode featured a new guest, a grieving parent, a recovering addict, a cancer survivor, all sharing their stories of resilience and hope. Viewers tuned in not just for inspiration but for connection, finding comfort in knowing that others had walked similar paths. For Whoopi, the experience prompted a quieter, more personal transformation. Though she didn't publicly declare herself a believer, she began exploring questions she had long avoided. She picked up books on spirituality, attended lectures on philosophy, and even joined a meditation group recommended by a friend. While she remained skeptical of organized religion, she discovered value in practices that encouraged mindfulness and reflection. In interviews, she occasionally referenced her conversation with Karoline, crediting it with sparking her curiosity about faith and its role in human resilience. The bond between Karoline and Whoopi also deepened over time. After exchanging numbers backstage, the two women kept in touch, occasionally texting or calling to check in on each other. Their conversations ranged from lighthearted banter to deeper discussions about life, loss, and purpose. Though their worldviews remained fundamentally different, they developed a mutual respect that transcended their differences. Months later, during a charity gala honoring individuals who use their platforms for good, Karoline was invited to speak. To her surprise, Whoopi introduced her, standing at the podium with a warm smile. "When I first met Karoline, I thought she was just another influencer trying to sell me something," Whoopi joked, drawing laughter from the crowd. "But she taught me something important, that faith isn't about answers, it's about connection. And sometimes that connection is enough to carry us through." As Karoline took the stage, she looked out at the audience, then back at Whoopi, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "Thank you, Whoopi, for reminding me that even in disagreement, understanding is possible," Karoline said, her voice steady and sincere. "Because in the end, we're all just trying to hold on to each other, to hope, and to the belief that no matter how dark things get, there's always light waiting to break through." The room erupted into applause, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. For Karoline, it was a moment of validation, not just for her work but for the power of dialogue to bridge divides. And for Whoopi, it was a reminder that growth often comes from the most unexpected places. Together they had shown the world that even laughter could lead to profound moments of clarity, and that sometimes the smallest acts of vulnerability could spark the biggest changes. The impact of Karoline and Whoopi's encounter continued to reverberate long after the cameras stopped rolling. What had started as a single episode of The View blossomed into something much larger, a cultural moment that challenged preconceived notions, sparked meaningful conversations, and inspired countless individuals to reflect on their own beliefs and struggles. For both women, the experience marked a turning point in their lives, shaping not only how they viewed each other, but also how they approached their respective platforms. In the months following the interview, Karoline's influence grew exponentially. Her Holding On series became a cornerstone of her online presence, drawing in millions of viewers who tuned in weekly to hear stories of resilience and hope. Each episode was raw and unfiltered, featuring guests from all walks of life: war, veterans battling PTSD, parents mourning the loss of a child, survivors of natural disasters, and even former skeptics like Whoopi herself, who made a surprise appearance in one episode. "I never thought I'd be sitting here talking about faith," Whoopi admitted during her guest spot, her trademark humor softening the emotional weight of the conversation. "But life has a funny way of making you reconsider things you thought were set in stone." She went on to share how her perspective had shifted since meeting Karoline, emphasizing the importance of staying open-minded, even when faced with ideas that initially seem foreign or uncomfortable. Their collaboration didn't stop there. Inspired by the overwhelming response to their initial exchange, Karoline and Whoopi teamed up to co-host a special live event called Finding Common Ground, aimed at fostering dialogue between people with differing beliefs. The event brought together speakers from diverse backgrounds: religious leaders, atheists, scientists, activists, and artists, all united by a shared desire to bridge divides through empathy and understanding. During the event, Karoline took the stage first, speaking passionately about the power of vulnerability. "When we're willing to share our truths, no matter how messy or imperfect they may be, we create space for others to do the same," she said, her voice resonating throughout the packed auditorium. "And sometimes those moments of honesty can lead to connections we never imagined possible." Whoopi followed with her own remarks, delivering a speech that left many in tears. "I've spent most of my life poking fun at religion because, let's face it, it's an easy target," she began, earning chuckles from the audience. "But what I've learned is that faith isn't just about rituals or rules. It's about finding strength when you think you've got nothing left. And whether you call that strength God, love, or sheer stubbornness, it's real. It's human, and it deserves respect." The highlight of the evening came when Karoline and Whoopi sat down together for an intimate Q&A session. Audience members lined up to ask questions ranging from lighthearted queries, "Whoopi, will you ever pray for your cable bill?" to deeply personal ones, How do you keep going when everything feels hopeless? Through it all, the two women demonstrated a remarkable chemistry, balancing humor with heartfelt advice and showcasing the depth of their evolving friendship. One particularly poignant moment occurred when a young woman named Emily stood up, visibly trembling as she addressed the pair. "I lost my mom last year and I feel so lost without her," she confessed, her voice breaking. "Karoline, you talked about holding on to your dad's memory, but what do you do when it feels like letting go is the only option?" Karoline paused, her eyes glistening with emotion. "First of all, thank you for being brave enough to ask that question," she replied gently. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying their love with you in a different way. Maybe it's through memories or lessons they taught you, or even small habits you picked up from them. That connection never truly disappears. It transforms." Whoopi chimed in, adding, "And don't forget, it's okay to lean on others when you're struggling. We're not meant to carry these burdens alone. Sometimes just knowing someone else understands can make all the difference." Emily nodded, wiping away tears as the audience erupted into applause. Moments like these underscored the true purpose of the event, not to provide definitive answers but to remind people that they weren't alone in their struggles. As word of finding common ground spread, it inspired similar initiatives across the country. Schools, community centers, and places of worship began hosting their own dialogues, encouraging participants to find commonalities rather than focus on differences. Media outlets hailed the movement as a beacon of hope in an increasingly polarized world, with commentators praising Karoline and Whoopi for using their platforms to promote unity and understanding. For Karoline, the success of these efforts reinforced her belief in the transformative power of storytelling. She continued to expand her reach, partnering with organizations focused on mental health, grief counseling, and interfaith dialogue. Her message remained consistent. Faith, in whatever form it takes, is a source of strength and connection. Whether someone found solace in prayer, meditation, nature, or simply the kindness of strangers, it all stemmed from the same universal desire to hold on, to hope, to love, and to meaning. Whoopi, meanwhile, embraced her role as an advocate for open-mindedness. Though she still maintained her signature wit and skepticism, she became more vocal about the importance of listening to perspectives different from her own. In interviews, she often referenced her friendship with Karoline as proof that growth could come from unexpected places. "If I can sit down with someone whose worldview is completely opposite mine and walk away with a new perspective, then anyone can," she quipped during an appearance on Good Morning America. "Just don't expect me to start attending church anytime soon." Their journey culminated in a joint book project titled Holding On: Stories of Faith, Doubt, and Everything in Between. Part memoir, part anthology, the book featured essays from both women, along with contributions from individuals whose lives had been touched by their work. From grieving parents to recovering addicts to atheists exploring spirituality, the stories highlighted the diversity of human experience while underscoring a central theme. Even in our darkest moments, there is light waiting to break through. The Why book debuted at #1 on bestseller lists, earning rave reviews from critics and readers alike. "This isn't just a book about faith," one reviewer wrote. "It's a testament to the power of vulnerability, empathy, and the courage to seek understanding, even when it's hard." Another praised the unlikely partnership between Karoline and Whoopi, calling it a masterclass in bridging divides and finding common ground. Looking back on everything that had transpired, neither woman could have predicted the profound impact their initial meeting would have. What began as a playful, if somewhat contentious, exchange on national television had evolved into a lifelong friendship and a shared mission to inspire change. For Karoline, it was proof that faith wasn't confined to religious boundaries. It was a force that connected us all. For Whoopi, it was a reminder that curiosity and openness could lead to growth, even in the most surprising ways. Ultimately, their story served as a powerful reminder of the importance of listening, learning, and leaning into discomfort. In a world often divided by ideology, politics, and belief systems, Karoline and Whoopi showed that connection was possible, not despite our differences, but because of them. By embracing vulnerability and choosing empathy over judgment, they proved that even laughter could pave the way for profound moments of clarity. And in doing so, they gave countless others permission to hold on, to hope, to love, and to the belief that no matter how dark things got, there was always light waiting to guide the way.